We live in a very exciting age where technology connects everybody, where everybody is really an expert in the sense that you have easy access to information. Journals are available, latest research is available, and there is this willingness to share information and knowledge. And therefore, in this kind of age, a different era, the big question really is, how do you therefore adapt to it? Bear in mind, strategy is a very unique discipline. How unique it is? Its uniqueness comes from the fact that it deals with the future, not with the past, not even with the present. It deals with the future, how the future is going to evolve. But it requires you in strategy original thinking. One of the key points missed again by all the YouTubes on other war. So it emphasizes originality in thinking. He don't want you to repeat your strategy. You've got to get out of your comfort zone in a modern lingo in order to look and relook and say, look, can I win this game by another new novel strategy? So it's anticipated this, and the problem that companies follow each other. So Sun Tzu is one of the early 2,500 years ago anticipating followership. A lot of people like to have followers, but then must realize that the game is not in following. The game is in overtaking. So strategic thinking is always about. That's why it's always relevant and relevant for everybody. Precisely because you also have your own strategy. The only thing that you don't make it explicit in drawing into a plan and all that. And I always advocate that you should have some form of written plan of your own. May not be very long, maybe just one page, but the idea of knowing where you are heading, and that is useful. And of course, a program like Art of War helps you to involve in thinking through yourself, independent thinking. How would you look at the situation? It's not learning from other people, how others would do it, but how would you, using Art of War as a guiding point? The interesting Chinese word is 词典. I always tell in China that Sun Tzu really tells the usefulness is really 词典. It points you to direction to think and to apply. And one of the most exciting research I'm looking into now is South China Sea. That if there is a war there, it's going to be fought quite differently because of the different kind of military assets. And therefore, thinking is important. The idea that you should get yourself involved in thinking, not just absorbing, but also have your own idea and your own creation, and if you don't start thinking, and your brains and neurons are not used to thinking, you will have a problem in the future of having to apply Sun Tzu. Since Singaporeans are bilingual, effectively bilingual, I hope, I have introduced in my own translation of The Art of War a novel method in which I actually present Sun Tzu Art of War in his original writing of 5,900 words, and then I embed the English translation beneath what Sun Tzu has written. It is very important in the study of Sun Tzu. Now, I've been doing this for 30 years, that you actually study the original work of Sun Tzu.
I presented on Sun Tzu across China from 2010 to 2019.
Why? Precisely because Sun Tzu wrote in a style of writing that is not current modern Chinese 普通话 way of writing. He wrote in using Sun Tzu period of Chinese. But then it is still Chinese characters. What I suggest you to do in analyzing and applying Sun Tzu, take this opportunity in this war for Singapore to relook at Sun Tzu in the origin. no writing. And ask yourself, right, that from this perspective, how would you therefore apply Sun Tzu in a war for Singapore?
シンガポール陥落の翌日2月16日
Most important for you to realize is that Chinese words embed strategic concepts. I will explain this as I go in the second part of this video. That particular words in Sun Tzu, out of war, actually embed a lot of meaning. I've explained qi, the word qi, that the first chapter of Sun Tzu, qi, and then the most interesting word is mo gong, and then you have, of course, this chapter 12, wo gong, and then of course you have this, the spine, chapter 13. But believe me, if you study Sun Tzu, and then you will find that certain words in Sun Tzu used actually embed a lot of ideas. Sun Tzu always emphasized one key principle that is being missed out in all the YouTube that you see on other war. What is that? Is the word Sun. Sun, translated into English, is God. But Sun Tzu used Sun as an example to illustrate that a good army move, Ru Sun. The Japanese did that. The Japanese went through the jungle in Malaysia very quietly. What do they use? They use bicycles without the tubing, and the Japanese punched through the jungles in Malaysia using bicycles in a very quiet, efficient manner. 他们动如神 as I was saying in Chinese. Right, I hope you look into this. It's available in Sun Tzu Institute. It's a website. Now you will find that this Sun Tzu Institute, there's a shop. And if you want to, you could download the e-version and read the word. It is embedded. Sun Tzu Art of War written in Chinese, and then my embedded translation, the closest I can come to. And I spent 2 years working on just that translation. It takes a lot of time really to translate Sun Tzu accurately. If you read in English, there's so many variations of it that sometimes the exact meaning is lost in the process of translation, or sometimes I say mistranslating.
Can we avoid this colossal defeat by the British, the Japanese?
I've created a game, management game, and I call it the War for Singapore. You see, in Singapore, there are a lot of training workshops and lectures, but it's all limited to lectures. And then if you can just learn by listening to lectures, then I think a lot of skills will pick up. But I don't think it's that simple. You require a lot of practice, a lot of redoing and rethinking it. That's how our brain works. I've done research on AI. I published perhaps the first paper in the world on artificial judging. And you know how computers learn? Computers learn through training. Computers also need to be trained. The neural network need to be trained in order to progressively improve on skills. It is the same thing on strategic thinking. How do you improve your strategic thinking? One way is to confront yourself with a real set of situations. When I say real set, it means to say that there are certain parameters that can be set to recreate that scenario. And you can get this in Sun Tzu Institute website again. It is War for Singapore. It is a training program. It's a training program, but it has an element of gaming. I suggest that maybe companies would like to use that as Adopt that as an outdoor activity, outdoor gaming plus bonding. Bonding is important. Bond your people through the project War for Singapore. Come to listen to a lecture on Art of War, get the overall overview of principles, and then from there, how would you use this set of 156 Sun Tzu idea and then apply it in the context of a war for Singapore? This program actually involves you to revisit again the battleground sites that is dotted over Singapore. Let it be a day workshop where the morning is the lecture, afternoon is the bonding, and then activity based. Business activities has to be structured for learning by your managers in such a way that they understand that it's not just textbook, it's not just learning concept, it's application. How to apply all these concepts in the real world. Our companies, very rarely do they do gaming. I did one in London, and a workshop in London on Art of War, and thereafter the conclusion was leadership by gaming. They have a game in order to simulate the process, what really it means to be a leader through a game. It has to be experienced.
In this part of the video, I'd like to explain the underlying theoretical model for this War for Singapore program. Firstly, you will find that I would start with the concepts, then experiencing, and finally concretization for the application of Art of War. Now, the key problem in Art of War is always the application. Then you'll find there is an added loop, visualizing and imagination. I find through my many years of teaching Art of War that it is important to learn Art of War from a war perspective. Sun Tzu wrote the book Art of War. It was grounded on the basis of a warfare. So if you start with that, then I think your understanding of Art of War will be deep and profound, and also you'll be able to develop from that foundation. And for the stage one, the concept part, I'll be using a set of 156 concepts embedded in the Art of War as the primary basis. But I'll find also key ideas that may well be relevant in the context of Singapore. The program is grounded on Singapore. Why? Because we need to have a conceptual grounding rather than just purely be on theory. And for that reason alone, we will then from there proceed after this the discussion of the key concepts to visit outdoor, visiting the sites. Or we could do the site visiting on the internet, calling e-visit. E-visit to see, understand the context that we are discussing about. So that is important. That experiential experience part cannot be left out in order to make it grounded. If it is an outdoor visit, the occasion can be a good one for fostering a bonding. I think nothing better to bond Singaporeans than to ask among Singaporeans, how would you defend Singapore? You know, the Japanese came and conquered. The British lost that war. Is it possible for us to outthink the British and through the process build a bonding through strategic thinking, to join a changing of ideas? This has not been done before, and I think it will be a useful program to foster bonding. How would you then apply strategic thinking to your company, especially in terms of meeting fierce competition in the marketplace? Now, the third phase is what I call the concretization phase, meaning to say that you have to say and ask yourself, I'm going to apply this strategy from Sun Tzu. Now, can I look at the specific context in which the strategy is to be applied? What are we facing as competitors? And that will foster in you, when you apply Sun Tzu Art of War strategy to your company, you will also adopt a concrete approach. Concretization is something that is to put a reality test to your ideas. In other words, will your strategy work? And for this purpose of this program, we actually take the art of war into the context of war for Singapore. And the parameters of the setting, we will then extract it from historical basis. But the whole idea is to understand that there's a need for you to also translate strategic concepts into application in the context of what Sun Tzu have written, The Art of War, for warfare situation. Training is an inner process of change. It is important to recognize this as an aspect of training. And if this program is part of the diploma program, then the whole idea will be therefore to submit a report and of how you would then formulate a strategy that could reverse history, meaning to say that the Japanese will not win and that you're able to defend Singapore in a war for Singapore. But the important part, of course, is that there is the other component, the visualization, imagination, that I did not discuss at all. The reason for this is that this is also another important aspect in strategy making. In other words, is to be able to visualize the competition. Now you will find the two words, keywords there, visualizing, and the other one is imagination. Now what you see there on portrayed there is really the Japanese Imperial Army, how they fight, efficiency and the operations, so that you have clearly ability to visualize, because Singapore was lost simply to 10,000 Japanese Imperial Army over British defense of up to 150,000 soldiers. Now the key word really in competition is imagination. The ability to see in the mind's eye what is going to evolve, even a particular set of parameters.
Sun Tzu Institute had actually organized conferences on Sun Tzu Art of War. And in one of those presentations, we had a topic that's very much akin to war for Singapore. And it is by one member of my WhatsApp, the Sun Tzu group. And he presented, his name is Paul Lim, and he actually presented on the battle for Singapore over the two British ships. And he explains to the conference and to deep research analysis what actually happened, and from his analysis.
On December 10th, 97 Japanese planes attacked the only two large Navy ships in the Far East. Without RAF protection, the ships are caught in an unavoidable crossfire of torpedoes. The battleship Prince of Wales and the cruiser Repulse are sunk, taking 840 men with them, including Admiral Sir Tom Phillips, recently appointed Commander-in-Chief of the Navy in Singapore. The battle would affect the future strategy of war. For the first time in history, battleships underway at sea are sunk from the air. The Japanese have once again rewritten the rules of war at sea. The blow to British morale is tremendous.
And therefore I feel that we really should relook at Second World War and ask ourselves, not for historical veracity and that part of it has been very well taken care of by the scholars doing research on the archive, but it is for us to think, to trigger our thinking. Now, if we were to look at the whole map of Singapore again, and then we were to assume those facts as parameters mean the parables, the variables that hold on to it.
For example, assets like the availability of the British troops being sent by the British to make Singapore really a fortress. Those assets remain.
British soldiers are unconcerned about the Japanese making their way down Malaya. They consider themselves a better trained, better equipped army.
Without changing the parameters, how would you have acted differently? How would you have, what you have done? In other words, instead of British, supposing we are all here and there in Singapore, how would you defend it? Looking at the past and what assets, military assets we had then. One of the useful things you should learn about Sun Tzu is that Sun Tzu goes down to detail. For example, on spying is a hot topic now. Sun Tzu actually tell you that what are sort of details you need to get. You need to get the names of the gatekeeper as an illustration. And therefore Sun Tzu believed in detailed planning. And one of the things you learn from War for Singapore is how the Japanese went through the Malaysia Peninsula. What did they do? What did they, the way they planned the activity, they took advantage of the fact that they had fought earlier in China. They took all the lessons they learned from fighting in China in planning their offensive in Malaysia. There are many videos available on YouTube looking at this war for Singapore, World War II. And one of the key things you will note will be that there is one that shows, for example, the boats used by the Japanese compared to the British, the boats that the British were using. And then the load carried by the Japanese was heavy, but they used a bicycle. And how the whole idea of the offensive is being planned. It tells you that in companies today, why did they find it so difficult to apply Sun Tzu? Very simple. Sun Tzu written 2,500 years ago is a very old context. That time they were writing this book on bamboo sleeves. Now we're using not even paper. We've gone beyond electronic text. So there's a vast change in context. Yet, you must try and learn to think in metaphorical terms. How to translate this idea into business context, how to apply it. Lesson from War for Singapore. In other words, when you plan for a product, you have to plan in detail, you have to work through the process. When a customer uses your product, what are the problems they're likely to face, and work through the whole process. In engineering terms, create a prototype, and from the prototype, try and anticipate the problem and then modify it. One of the things that you'll find in competition and strategy is wait for your competitor to come up with a product. And what do you do? From the product that the competitor create, find out what are all the complaints on the internet about that product. And then in 6 months' time, come out with one original, yet improved version of your competitor product in order to have one edge over your competitor. Competition is very keen now. Innovation requires creative thinking. You have to create a product that is always in some way superior to the competition. In that same way, you find that if you use the YouTube resources, you'll find that there are YouTube that will tell you, right, in detail, comparing the Japanese average soldier and the British soldier, the things they use and equipment they use, and how they misspeak. Now we come to the part where I like to explain before I show you the lectures on, based on the slides of transparency, is on a concept of transference of strategic thinking. You have done the analysis of the War for Singapore. Yet the most importantly, you have done the thinking, the reflection, and then what we call in Chinese, we call 考验, and then you study and you analyze it, and you say, look, there's certain things I can do. I will not repeat the mistakes made. And so the insights that you gain, and the most important thing is you must be able to really see through and analyze for yourself. Now, the whole idea is not really about doing a scholarly or a historical research, but then giving the parameters that Singapore faced during the Second World War. How would you outthink the British? It's very important in training. Now training, I long been in training. I was back in the 80s, National Productivity Board, and I actually was the one who was involved in transferring Japanese corporate strategy from Kokase Sensei, Japanese practice center, over to Singapore through workshop. But then I realized the limitation of workshop, because you can't really learn things by just lectures and listening and then hoping there from there to learn how to apply certain things. The most a lecture can do is to inspire you, to trigger you. And Sun Tzu is unique. And why Sun Tzu is unique? I always believe that Sun Tzu is one of the key factors why the Chinese are able to so quickly rise in the economy and overtake the US. Because the Chinese, you find that the culture is a rich culture, but Sun Tzu in particular is very good in transference. He sees, an eagle coming down on the top, plucking the rabbit, and the timing and the execution. And he draws on that. He transfers that aspect of his thinking. And as he look at it, he reflect on it. And then when I say thinking, I mean it's just his reflection of it, and he draw insight from it, and he's able to transfer it to the army, to train the army, to focus on executing right. In the same way, in analysis with Second World War, you will notice one thing very clear that will come out almost instantaneously. Is that the British grossly underestimate the Japanese. Now, having done the analysis, tell yourself, look at your competition. Are you underestimating your competitors? This is one point where we call transference. This is a key point, but the important thing is it's not from a set of lecture notes that you draw it. That is from your own looking at the real case, the real world situation. And for example, the Japanese were very good in applying Sun Tzu's 13th chapter on spying. They got a British to spy for them and get all this data and then they feed it across. And it was actually the planning was done in Hainan Island. The key question now is, having done the case, have you reflect on the point possibly that competitors may well be getting data about you, getting information about you, and then maybe following you, maybe actually trying to imitate your strategy. And these are things that will come from what I call transference of things. Okay, you did a case study, you analyze in depth, and it's based on hard fact of human being. The key thing why Sun Tzu is still applicable today, after 2,000 years, the fact that you're still competing with human beings. I did a workshop, right? And where I emphasize that when you are fighting against man versus man, I think Sun Tzu is applicable. But if men, you are fighting against wolf men, right? Always well known for this Lansing Guanli, but you are fighting against wolf men. Would Sun Tzu still be applicable? That's the thought for you to reflect. But I hope you enjoy the lectures I'm going to give you on using the slides and explaining, and then hoping you'll be able to acquire the ability to transfer what you learn into your context. That's the wider perspective of learning. True learning comes from life experiences.
What would be most interesting would be how to transfer the strategic thinking on War for Singapore to corporate business. You may be inspired to think again on strategy. You could ask yourself, can I do better through strategy, having been through it, Everybody's business is different. So yours may consist of physical product. The other may be strictly service provider. And another may have a combination of product and service. And in rethinking these factors are important. If it is a combination of product and service, then you have to match against the competition, the competitors, in how to improve, enhance the product combined with the service. One key point, don't overanalyze. Focus on your top closest competitors in the same product customer niche. In other words, that they are competing for the same type of customers that your product, your service offers. The most important factor is to focus on the winning edge. What is it will give you that winning edge? You are all constrained by cost and opportunity. But then the key point is focus on asking yourself, what should your winning edge be?
Whatever activity you're involved in, and where there is competition, the key thing I've learned over the years is that you win by the edge. 100 meters running, you break by nearly just split of a second at the very top level, competing at the top level. And in business, you're always competing at the top level so that you can achieve sales, achieve profits, and give you the edge. So winning by the edge is very important. And you analyze the war for Singapore. What is it that gave the Japanese the edge? Really, if you look at the whole episode as a whole, the British underestimation of the Japanese, right? Churchill said that, you know, the collapse of Singapore was really the most shameful military episode in the whole of the British Empire. But the Japanese won by the edge, by applying Sun Tzu. But no other way would 10,000 men be able to take a country. Singapore lost simply due to 10,000 Imperial Japanese army. But when you study the whole episode, it is following basically to the principles of Sun Tzu, using spying, very detailed spying at the beginning stage. Number two, element of surprise. And you find most powerfully is the idea that 10,000 men can do the job against the army as huge as 150,000 from the British. That belief is grounded on Sun Tzu. And therefore you find that in business it's the same. You must think through, think the right strategy. What is it that will give you that winning edge? And in that search for that idea, for that aha, for that breakthrough, it requires you, it won't come to you just like that. It needs you to go through deep thinking and deep analysis and understanding the competition, and then to shape out a strategy that enable you to win. One of the useful things you should learn about Sun Tzu is that Sun Tzu goes down to detail. For example, on spying. Spying is a hot topic now. Sun Tzu actually tell you that what are sort of details you need to get. You need to get the names of the gatekeeper as an illustration. And therefore Sun Tzu believe in detailed planning. And one of the things you learn from war for Singapore is how the Japanese went through the Malaysia Peninsula. What did they do? What did they, the way they planned the activity, they took advantage of the fact that they had fought earlier in China. They took all the lessons they learned.
Were then made in the vicinity of the Wusung Fort and in Luho and Lotian on the Yangtze River, north of Shanghai. The Chinese drew back to positions 5 or 10 miles inland, where they could secure some protection from the heavy Jap naval gunfire. At the same time, the invaders succeeded in making a surprise landing some 20 miles to the south of Shanghai, put 2 divisions ashore, and pushed rapidly north to outflank the city. The Chinese position was thus made untenable, and a withdrawal was ordered to the west and to the south, toward Nanking and Hangzhou. But only about half of the Chinese army that had fought at Shanghai was left to withdraw.
From fighting in China, in planning the offensive in Malaysia.
October 1941. Japan completes final preparations for war. A prime objective is Malaya because of its rich natural resources of rubber.
There are many videos available on YouTube looking at this war for Singapore, World War II. And one of the key things you will note will be that there is one that shows, for example, the boats used by the Japanese, compared to the British, the boats that the British were using. And then the load carried by the Japanese was heavy, but they used a bicycle. And how the whole idea of the offensive is being planned. It tells you that in companies today, why did they find it so difficult to apply Sun Tzu? Very simple. Sun Tzu written 2,500 years ago is a very old context. That time they were writing this book on bamboo sleeves. Now we're using not even paper. We've gone beyond electronic text. So there's a vast change in context. Yet, you must try and learn to think in metaphorical terms. How to translate this idea and into business context, how to apply it. Lesson from War for Singapore. In other words, when you plan for a product, you have to plan in detail, you have to work through the process. When a customer uses your product, what are the problems they're likely to face? And work through the whole process. In engineering terms, create a prototype, and for the prototype, try and anticipate the problem and then modify it. One of the things that you'll find in competition and strategy is wait for your competitor to come up with a product. And what do? From the product that the competitor create, find out what are all the complaints on the internet about that product. And then in 6 months' time, come out with one original, yet improved version of your competitor product in order to have one edge over your competitor. You can do that. Learn from the Japanese. Okay. I thought the Chinese the same thing. First, why you want to invent the wheel when it's already invented? Okay, the Chinese had a lot of pride in that sense in the past. Why should we copy the Americans? Why can't we be different? Why can't we be unique? But actually, if you follow the Japanese style is we copy first. Then we innovate. So Japanese are copy innovators. Not innovators. Because for any product that comes about, there is a lot of trial and error. There's a lot of R&D, there's a lot of, So by copying, we're actually benefiting from the person's point. You see what I'm trying to get at? Right? Then after that, then you improve on it, copy innovate. That's why Japan was industrialized very fast compared to the Chinese. The Chinese in the past, you know in China. The Chinese in the past, you know in China, right, what happened? They didn't allow that. They didn't allow under Empress Dowager. She was anti-Western. Meiji Revolution is different. The Japanese decided, okay, we have imposed ourselves long enough, we will now embrace Westernization. As a result, the Japanese fleet was able to sink the Russian fleet, right, through rapid industrialization. Competition is very keen now. Innovation requires creative thinking. You have to create a product that is always in some ways superior to the competition.
6万の捕虜を沿道にせしめて、今日は山下最高指揮官のエペが行われた。イギリス本国兵、マレ兵、豪州兵、スコットランド兵、インド兵、 それは主従雑多な軍隊の展覧会である。山下軍司令官は列の最右翼に立って敬礼するパーシバルに近づいて握手を交わし、
As you have just seen, never had so many soldiers surrendered to so few, and all documented in video. And it's a useful tool for us to really develop a workshop or training or a program to rethink the defense of Singapore, how we could outthink both the British as well as the Japanese. And my idea for this, developing this video to communicate with you, is to rethink your strategy and to rethink using the latest advantage of technology resources that are available to really for us to look at strategy in a deeper way and to connect between war for Singapore and then transferring that, as we have seen in my lectures earlier, how to transfer that insight into corporate strategy. And the competition today is really on innovation, the ability to outthink and outthink your competitors in terms of product design, in terms of competing and then in terms of following, and yet overthinking. This is the key part of it. And what I'm going to do now in this final video, part of the video, closing it all up, is to discuss about the philosophy of this mythology and briefly on the mythology, so that we get an idea of how where the focus is. The focus is really on strategic thinking, and to stimulate that, so that you can answer to yourself this question: how to apply Sun Tzu? This is the most prevalent question I have when I do workshops in Singapore to managers, because they see what Sun Tzu as simply learning concept. No, it goes beyond that. It is really in the art of application. Sun Tzu is written, as the title of the book will tell you, Ping Fa, like the art of war. And really, it is about the art of competition, of how you compete. And you find that I will, following this, to give you a clear instructions of how it can, this whole thing can be structured. Now, how did the idea come to me? The idea came to me 2 decades ago. Yes, 2001 to be precise, when I was asked to give a talk on total defense of Singapore. And as you can see, right, I gave a lecture on, I developed a lecture on defense of Russia against Germany, which is very interesting. In fact, I have a lot of respect for Russian strategy. The Russians out-taught the Germans in terms of strategy. They knew the motherland, they knew the land expand, and they used that aspect of it in order to compete against the Germans in war. Now, for China, as I've said earlier in my other program, if you are a subscriber, you'll find that I will notify you. And this was really on China, Three Kingdoms, and strategic thinking. My focus is always on strategic thinking. Russia have won against the Germans. The Chinese have won against the Japanese. And for China, it's really about strategic thinking by Mao Zedong. And Mao Zedong is a great strategist. Without him, China will never ever beat the Japanese in war. So I'd like you to review now and have a look at what I'm going to suggest as a methodology. But the focus really on thinking. How do you outthink your competitor? It can be applied, right? Now, soon to the key point, you realize the word war means competition. And how do you outcompete your competitors? That's the real key. It can be applied in politics, It can apply in football. It can, because the core theme really, the core focus is competition. And Sun Tzu have taught, written a book, Art of War, precisely in how, and you have to do it, and for war also to emphasize, can you win over a competitor by not fighting? And the key point really is the people. He wants to avoid suffering of people. A philosophy of Sun Tzu is ideal for any country because Sun Tzu focuses on the theme of people. His main concern is always people. And now this strategic thinking is useful as a simulation exercise, to simulate you to think and to know how to apply. And it's not so easy to apply Sun Tzu Art of War. And I think YouTube, the video you may give the wrong impression, is easy to apply. And I think the true application of Sun Tzu, you have to really study the original Chinese text written by Sun Tzu. And then you will see the richness of the thinking and the ideas. And some of that are not easily translatable into another language. I hope you enjoy this part of the whole program, whole episode. And of course, war is very complex in the modern 21st century. You don't have to use bullets, you don't have to use missiles, you don't have to use nuclear bombs. War is already been fought using currency. And you find I have a chapter, I edited a book, and this is really on strategy and finance. And in my chapter that you may want to have a look at, right, is currency at war, that I foresaw that coming. In a conference in Malaysia, I actually organized by the Institute in Malaysia, that actually the focus was on the emerging currency at war. And I also said in the article that US have to swing towards socialism, some aspect of socialism, because it is too imbalanced. The US is too imbalanced. Far too few own far too much. But that's American problem. But what I'm trying to emphasize here is, well, this is war for Singapore, but then really, in the modern world, war is a complex matter. There's even talk of viral warfare, economic warfare, tariff warfare, and so on and so forth. But the focus here is on really to get you across the application of Sun Tzu, his concepts that he rewritten 2,500 years ago, what this means and how this can be applied, and how are these relevant in just past warfare or World War II. Singapore is just one country in episode of Second World War, but there are a lot of other cases that could well also be used as case studies in order to develop strategic insight. I believe the way to learn Sun Tzu Art of War is really experiential, that you have to go through this experience. And as I've done in NTU when I taught the program, you will see I actually emphasize on analysis of wars, but we do it in a fast fashion. We use documentary. And then from there, the students begin to be able to test out the ideas and have developed a set of cards to enable fast thinking, sharp thinking, of analyzing battles as these are being fought. And you must realize one thing about strategy is that the world does not wait for you. You have to adapt to the world. And the other important point is that in strategy, there's never been possible to get all information. You always rely on partial information in order to formulate. Like, for example, if you want to do a real war gaming, and one of the key problems is that a lot of things are secret. How do you model that technical specification of the latest fighter jet that's been developed, for example, by a competitor? And you find that this will be confidential information, classified information. But the whole idea of strategy is thinking through and then making assumptions and then questioning the validity of the assumptions this is a very important aspect of strategy. It cannot be made like an operational manual that you can practice. And this is a key point that Sun Tzu emphasizes always on original thinking. You must outwit your opponent, and opponent will use your last fought battle and assume that you'll be replicating it. And that's where strategic thinking comes into play. For example, how was Hannibal, the greatest strategist in the West, beaten by the Romans? It is simply because Scipio, right, actually studied Hannibal and then replicate his strategy against him in the final battle, Zama's battle, right? So you find that in the same way, any company's success, the moment your competitor could remodel your strategy and rework on the strategy, then there's time for you to be concerned and to be worried about. And finally, that this is otherwise it becomes so important in today's world, again, because of the rising possibility of real war right near Singapore. I live in Singapore, right, in Southeast Asia, and now the conflict, the possibility of real war arising is there. Where? South China Sea. And this is where strategic thinking based on Sun Tzu would be very relevant in this context.